Good afternoon from Helsinki, and welcome to the seminar, The Art of Illustrating the Invisible, Diversity and Multiculturalism in Picture Books. Today, we're celebrating the Nordic bookworm character and its 5 finalist friends by organizing this seminar, and after that, with the opening of the Nordic Bookworm with Friends exhibition here at the library. The Nordic Bookworm, a reading promotion project, has been granted 3 years of funding from the Nordic Council of Ministers. The project is initiated and run by Nordic Culture Point, and today's seminar is the second in the series of 3 seminars we'll be organizing during these 3 years. In May last year, we had a seminar about the wild and beautiful Nordic picture books. Today, our focus is on diversity in illustrations. My name is Mikaela Wikström, and I work as a children's librarian here at the Nordic Culture Point. I'm also the project leader for the Nordic Bookworm. For those of whom, for whom Nordic Culture Point still is a question mark, I can tell you that we administer 4 cultural funding programs, we run a cultural center here in Helsinki, and have a very cozy Nordic library with very nice stuff. So welcome. In today's seminar, we're going to meet illustrator Maria Sann, a winner of the Rudolf Koivu Prize in 2021, who explores her personal story as an emigrant from Russia in 1993 and her quest for new expressions without stereotypical visual effects. We will also meet publisher Jenni Erkintalo, founder of Etana Editions, who will talk about the creation of a multifaceted picture book, one that speaks to the reader and evokes emotions, questions, and memories, but which can also create memories, humanism, and a greater understanding of the world around us. After these 2 presentations, there will be time for discussion. And for you who are following the stream, you can write your questions in the chat. I hope you're going to enjoy your stay with us this afternoon. Now it's time for me to wish our first guest welcome. Please, Maria Sann, the stage is yours.
Hello. Let me see if I can get this thing to work. Like so. Yes, so as mentioned, I was born in the Soviet Union, and so was my mother. And actually, my father moved there when he was 13, so they grew up with this utopian idea of diversity and multiculturalism that was the narrative of the Soviet Union. And as you can see, it was a really beautiful dream that people, I think, looking at this image today, looks like it perhaps has turned into a nightmare on some level. And this picture is interesting still, I think, because it represents this perhaps naive idea of people living together. Everybody are the same size. They're all very strong. They're about the same age. And then we have this cis-hetero male, blonde with blue eyes person in the center, of course. And I think this is something that both has united people, both in the Soviet Union and elsewhere, because I believe that these sort of representations have been quite common everywhere. But we are ready, and a lot of us who work with children's book think about this, how our stories and representations repeat or maybe shape our view of what it is to be human. And also there is another question of who is in charge of letting these stories through, and how every time we work, we are always trying to avoid toxic representation of diversity and whatever that means. When I grew up, I was born in '82, so Star Trek came out just a few years before, and I think there is a sort of repetition here of the same idea again. Now we have more, perhaps there is an alien species, but still we have this strong middle-aged white man in the center, so at that point it hasn't been broken, but I think we are pretty soon getting from that narrative onward. This is one of my first children's books, and I can see in the light of the other of these two posters that I think I'm still doing it in a way. There is like this dream that we have these kids who are playing together. Everybody is a little bit different, but they're all the same, and they get along okay or worse. In our book with Malin Klingenberg, the main character actually has an Asian background, but we never mentioned it in the book because it doesn't really matter and it shouldn't matter. And for me, this book felt honest, even though I am white, and in that way I'm quite privileged. I don't have the experience of being an immigrant and, for example, have dark skin, or I don't have any visible limitations in my body, at least. But still, I come from an area in Helsinki where kids from different backgrounds play together. So for me, this is an honest story of my child's environment. Yes, so like I mentioned, there have been in the Nordic children's book field, I've seen books about mental illness and neurodiversity, also books that sort of tackle ableism or ageism, or at least I have read them this way. I don't know if each and every one of these books that have been made have had this intention, but I see them as a reader that way. And also we have a lot of books that include that represent and include different backgrounds for children, so that when they read books about themselves, they can recognize themselves in these books. For example, the Veera Salmi and Elina Varsta's books about kids just doing regular kid stuff in a regular kindergarten. I've seen this. My kid have been in a kindergarten that looks like this. This is for me believable. This is Finland today. But also there have been attempts of sort of breaking the archetypes and letting people of different color into the stories that the children read in the kindergarten. So there's not only these stories about today, but also these larger stories. And of course, none of us are royalty, so we don't really recognize ourselves in these, but I guess in a way that they still represent our archetypical ideas of what it could be to be a girl, for example. And some other stereotypicals or stereotypes are broken. This is another example. This is the other children's book that I have illustrated so far. And the author, Henrika Andersson, really wanted me to, really wanted Pippi Longstocking to be dark in this story. And when I think about Pippi Longstocking's background, it really makes sense, because her dad is a king in Africa, and he comes to visit very seldom. So in today's world, it actually would make perfect sense. Perhaps we can even break these other stories that aren't as archetypical as the princess stories. Even the newer stories can be remade again. And then we have these really tragical, and I hope that these stories that I hope will represent more marginal group of immigrants that have really scary stories behind themselves. And these, of course, these two examples were made by Frank Furu, who works with children who have been brought in, for example, without their parents. And so for him, this is a true story. This isn't something that he just sort of made up. This is for his reality. And also Sanna Pelliccioni has made this silent book that does not have text, but can help us, for example, look at the story of refugees that go through horrible trips and create empathy somehow. And one may think that perhaps these are, again, white people telling stories of others or telling stories that we don't know. But I would argue that as soon as a children's book creator with a background like that shows up, they will be welcomed with open arms. So until that time, someone needs to tell the story in the best way that we can. And this is an example, or these are two examples of people who have diverse backgrounds. Jani Toivola, illustrated by Sara Obele, who creates a story about both having darker skin and perhaps being non-typically heterosexual, so perhaps this boy is homosexual or bisexual, we don't know. And then Johanna Lestelä's series about Tuikku, it's just a kid who just happens to have darker skin. For me, when I heard about this book in 2017 called Mennään jo naapuriin, I was really happy because it represented so many different homes from so many different cultures. But when I look at these two books, its predecessor from 2007, which is called Mennään jo kotiin, I as somebody who moved from one place to another, I feel a little bit triggered, because then I would feel represented in the Mennään jo naapuriin if it too was called kotiin, because I mean it too is a home, and none of the other places were actually, I mean, it's hard to explain perhaps, but if you look at the picture here with the family who are all speaking different languages together, and there are languages directed at different family members, or perhaps some people speak a different language to the dog, this was my reality. And if it's called we're going to the neighbors, then I feel pointed out that I'm not from here, I'm from the neighboring country, for example, which I am. I was born in Russia, and my mother spoke Russian and we spoke Swedish. So for the Russians, we were the Swedes living in Russia. It was kind of hard to explain the whole Finland-svensk idea there. But my dad's mother is from the United States. She was born and raised in Detroit. But that's not completely true, because I think nobody who is white and who is from the United States is really from there. So her parents were actually from Finland originally, from different parts of Finland. But they didn't speak Finnish to her, so English was her mother tongue. One of my brothers with this background is married to a Japanese, and they have a child together. My other brother has moved to the United States, and he has 2 kids there with a woman who was born in the United States, and we all know that what that means. She's white, so she has half Italian and half Irish relatives. I'm sorry for the very monochrome color scheme here. You can probably tell which one is which. And I have 2 children with 2 different fathers, one of whom has a German citizenship, but he's actually Finnish. He's lived his whole life in Finland, but his dad is actually German, and his mom is Finnish. And the other child's parent is Finnish. So these are my combinations, and this is my reality, and this is my home, and this is for me completely normal. So when I grew up in a rural place in Moscow, it was quite common for me to play with street dogs. Street dogs are just everywhere. And I remember my mom getting scared, and she was like, "What are you doing? You're right next to the pack of street dogs." And I said, "It's okay, Mom. I touched their noses. They were all moist, so the dogs are healthy." And the dogs were actually pretty used to us kids, and I've never heard of any accidents. I mean, they probably wouldn't tell me because I was quite young, but it wasn't like if you wanted your child to play in the playground, there would be street dogs there. So it was either being inside all the time or being with the street dogs. And we lived right next to the kindergarten, as you can see behind the trees. And there was this fence that always had holes in it. And during the day, I ran away from the kindergarten to play with my friend who wasn't in the kindergarten. And for me, this was normal until one day we were caught, and then we had to stay. I had to stay put on my side. But we actually went to the kindergarten through the hole after the kindergarten day was over. So I grew up with the typical Russian symbols and culture, children's culture, which was different from the one that you grew up with. If you grew up here in Finland or in Europe, you probably never had a love for Lenin or a passionate desire to become like Lenin. I didn't either, but I was supposed to. So we were all wearing these little badges, and my whole childhood, we were raised to have a national, strong national love for our country. But I was also always pointed out as not being from Russia, really. I mean, I was the Swede living in Russia, so my whole life I've had the experience of being the other, because it was really quite unusual to speak Swedish in Russia. There were all these other languages, but nothing from a European, like from a Scandinavian country. And then all of a sudden we had McDonald's and Adidas, which became like another really important, really big thing in Russia. And of course Barbie, everybody wanted to have the Barbie doll. I never had a Barbie doll. I never had Adidas anything while we were living in Russia. And we never went to McDonald's, because at the same time that these brands came to Russia, there was a period where there really wasn't anything to eat in the store. And I remember a time when my parents were really scared and we really didn't have any food in our fridge. And at some point somebody brought animals that were bred for their fur. And they were trying to feed us that. It smelled horrible. But that is what hunger looks like and smells like for me. So I think at some point my parents made the decision that we should probably go back to where my dad was born. So, but before we did, I spent my time just as a regular Russian girl, which means that we were playing in construction sites. This is something that when I've spoken to people that come from the Soviet Union, that this is totally normal. Everybody did this, but I could never imagine my kids doing this in Finland, for example. I mean, even an adult wouldn't be permitted to go to a space like that. But these were much more fun for us than the playgrounds that were built for us. And so in 1993, we moved, and instead of sort of finally coming home to the place where I was from, I was met with pity. And some people told me that it must be really horrible when you can't be proud of the country you're from. I can imagine that Russian children might hear the same sort of questions or the same sort of comments right now. And both my dad said to me about other children who spoke Russian that maybe you should play with someone else. But now that I'm an adult and I speak to my friends who I've had for a very long time, they have told me that some of their parents have also told them that maybe you shouldn't play with the Russian girl. And compliments would sound like, I'm surprised to find out that you're Russian. You're not at all like other Russians. Which to me, as a child, of course, meant that maybe I shouldn't make my whole Russianness a big deal, and I should probably hide it. Because I speak Swedish, so I mean, I don't really need to show where I'm from. And I think at that point, if I would have had Anna Härmälä's book, Du hör inte hit Beiron, I might have recognized myself in this story. It's a really simple story, really. There's a dog that is mixed bred that goes to a dog's beauty contest and realizes that no matter how hard the dog tries, they will never fit in. And there is a hierarchy of of different sort of breeds where you can never really live. And somebody could see this as a book about racism, but for me it's a book about a hierarchy within within a society, and also about finding yourself and your crowd. When you grow up in 95 with parents who were unemployed, which was a quite common fate for Russian-speaking parents, because they had a hard time learning the language, and they perhaps weren't always considered as highly educated enough, perhaps, or at least my parents never got the jobs that they used to have, despite having higher education degrees. This could have been any typical childhood, really. This has less to do with me being from Russia than it has to do with me having unemployed parents. And so I think today I recognize myself in articles that are written about childhood poverty, for example. These experiences are connecting me to other people, both immigrants and not. And there is a certain shame about poverty. It's really not talked about, and in children's books you rarely see it. It's not something that I haven't seen one book made in Finland about childhood poverty as at least in the very realistic depiction of it, perhaps. But then again, I haven't read all the children's book. I'm not really a children's book expert, in a way. And shame is, for me, it's a sort of aggression that is directed inwards. I think that Tove Jansson's The Invisible Child depicts this. So my Russianness, if there is such a thing, if there ever was such a thing for me, really became an invisible part of me, because of all of these comments, and perhaps because I associated it with a lot of things that for me felt shameful at the moment. And again, I mind you that this might be the experience of Russians or Russian-speaking people at the moment. I'm going to hop back, because as you can see here, my shoes are too small and my clothes don't really fit. So my decision was to start working quite early, actually. I was already working in the little clothes shops here in the center of Helsinki while I was studying in school. And also when I went to higher upper secondary education, I remember being really, really tired all the time, and I never finished I never got the white cap, even though I was in that sort of a school. I decided to quit because it just felt like an impossible ordeal, and also because my teacher told me that I could actually get into art school even without it. So I was like, okay, then I will not torture myself, and it's true. I got in, but I think that there is something about it, about being. About not having enough, and perhaps the shame of not being able to admit it. Some of my friends that I went to school with lived in an area next to this really nice flea market that is in this area. But my mom was selling in this flea market, so her way of getting extra money was to in the morning go and buy some stuff off cheaply, and then just sell it with a little bit more to get some profit, to get something else so that she could take care of her family a little bit better. But at the same time, there were kids that were really well off, and for me, this was a sort of something that was really visible. And if I was with her, for me, I remember feeling a little bit ashamed of this. Today, perhaps my mom would carry food from a restaurant to your home. I don't know, maybe. There is another way, and this reminds me again of Star Trek. It's a sort of a sci-fi way of picturing us humans that I found. I might not be able to pronounce this right, but Maria Sann from Norway has made this book about a thief family, and this illustration is from a picture that depicts outcasts, and they're all very strange looking. Everybody's very, very different, and even though they're quite humanoid, they're not quite human. Here's another picture from the book. You can see all the different houses have their own very distinct looks. There is a sausage family, there is a piano family, and maybe art family perhaps. And then there are the thieves living up on that hill. And you can see that the children all go together in this school. So there is this society and the mix of these different cultures within a culture that, for me, I recognize this much better than if I would read a book, for example, about another Russian child coming from Russia with all the samovars and balalaikas, which, mind you, we never had at our home. So for me, that would be even more foreign. But something like this perhaps creates a space for recognition, at least for me. I got a grant from Kuvittajat ry, the Illustrators Association in Finland, to look a little bit closer at my Russian background. And I was planning on actually going to Moscow to see the street dogs, to walk in the city. I'm not sure that's going to be possible. I don't know. But in one way or another, I will definitely make this trip. Perhaps it will be more of a memory trip or something like that. So I need to reevaluate my plan. And I think it is important, especially today, with the new wave of immigrants coming from a place similar to my home. And unfortunately, it looks different from what my home looks like. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria. It was very interesting to hear about your childhood in Russia, former Soviet Union, and looking at these pictures that show that we really can break those stereotypics by the text and the illustrations in the picture books. So, for those who are looking at the stream, I'm reminding you of making those questions to Maria and Jenni Erkintalo, who is going to be next on stage. On Facebook, of course, the chat on Facebook. Yeah, only on Facebook. The comments on Facebook. Okay, next, please welcome Jenni Erkintalo from Etana Editions.
Okay. Hello, my name is Jenni. And I'm going to show you this small presentation of what it means to be a publisher, independent publisher in Finland, or who is doing the work based on our own values and what type of stories we are publishing. So how does it go? There was like this. Okay. So Etana Edition is an independent publishing house. We are 2 persons working in Etana, and we founded in 2014. What we did, why we actually wanted to have our own publishing house, was that we were thinking that there is not this kind of books available in Finnish language that are original Finnish books. And why what we did first is that we planned it maybe 1.5 years and decided to do this kind of crowdfunding campaign to establish the resources, financial resources to print the books. And these are the very first 2 books that we did in 2014 in November, and these were for really small children. About the colors in the sea, or colors of creatures, and one more by Reka Kirai, my colleague. So our publishing house is founded by Reka and me, and this our background is a bit different. We are representing two different cultures. Reka is from Hungary originally, in Budapest, studied fine arts there, moved to Finland because of one of her friends were in exchanging artists in Rauma, where I'm actually from. But this is another story. But we met in a university, Art and Design University, Helsinki. But later on, we met at, we found out that we were living in the same house. And then we started to talk about that, hey, we share some quite similar things and what we want to do. I'm coming from Rauma, the small city from the west coast. I'm Finnish speaking. I don't have any foreign background in me. I've always been like educated, have gone to school here, and my background is classical music. I was enthusiastic about it when I was a child. Never cared so much about drawing or or writing or anything like that. But once we grow, we found new features in ourselves, and then maybe this kind of growing up in a small city also brings us this kind of if you're a little bit different, if you can always feel the other, like some kind of you don't belong there. And personally, I found my place in the art university, and the second time, I think what I want to do for my living was with Reka when we started to talk about children's books. So we both sort of like carried all these beautiful French and Italian and colorful books to Finland every time when we were traveling, having an extra suitcase. And then we were thinking about that, hey, should we add some more color in Finnish children's books? And as being educated as a graphic designer, Reka has also the fine art background and illustration. So we were thinking, I actually studied illustration in Konstfack in Sweden, and that's why we were thinking that, hey, we could do something together. It took maybe half a year and we didn't do anything. We were just sharing the same studio, and then two sudden things happened. Reka lost his father and I lost my father-in-law, and then we were thinking that both of those men had been sort of like persons who wanted to make it happen in their lives. So we followed their examples, and then we held this crowdfunding campaign for our two books. From every book we have gone to the next one, so we didn't inherit any money or anything like that. We must be crazy to be publishers, but it's the passion that comes straight from our heart. So what we are doing, that we are only specialized in children's books, mainly from 1 to 9 years old children. And that's our core, and we want to do picture books. If there is a picture book that we found interesting for adults, we are open for it. But at this moment, we are only doing for children, the books. So ever since 2014, Etana has been traveled around the world. We are now 7 years old, and we have published 61 books, where from 41 is Finnish original titles, and 10 of them are like debut books. What Etana has also done is that we have spread our word of beautiful, colorful, new Finnish picture books around the world, and we have sold some foreign rights to I think it was 27 for the 15 different languages. So what we believe in, that picture books can also like open the borders or doors to see a new worlds, and that's why we also think about that it's okay to write Finnish stories and spread them around. We're actually going to go to the Bologna next week, so if any of you will be there, let's go and have a good Italian espresso someday. What we have also done is that once we have been in Bologna, we have been nominated for the Astrid Lindgren Memorial Award in 2014. One of our books has got this special mention there in fiction category, Bologna Ragazzi Award. As a publisher, we were the best children's publisher of the year, the European nomination, like we got shortlisted there, 2019. That was the last time when we were there. But and then we got this kind of Finnish culture and education ministry granted us like this Children's Culture State Award 2020, which was a huge recognition of our work so far. So altogether, we have counted that maybe there is 35 prizes or nomination for our publishing house or our books. But this is the background, what it means to be a publisher and what we have done. So now I'm going to talk about a little bit our values and our philosophy, what we do as a publisher. So Etana means snail in Finnish, and we believe that snail is always at home. It carries its homes with it, and that's why we also think that when a child is reading their favorite book, it can bring this kind of feeling of being at home. Like Maria also said that this home feeling is really important, and that brings some kind of safety and security for child's life. And it do matter what type of stories and books we are reading, because we need to get some kind of we need to get the child reader to identify with them and recognize themselves there, and also what else we need to create for this safe feeling. So what we like to think about is that our publishing house is also a home where all the other talented storytellers have freedom and our support to work on their stories, and if we think that they fit with us. And of course, there are plenty of talented co-workers who has give us an honor to work with them, and we are so happy to share this journey with them. We believe that Etana Editions picture books are the result of the full-hearted work of a big family. This is just a half of the people that we have behind us in this network. We have like foreign storytellers from abroad, and also people who lives in Finland. So let's go further. So how do we choose as a publisher our books? Like I said also in the early on, everything is based on our values. And now I'm going to open up a bit of these. So what is our values? One of like today's, also this seminar is talking about is diversity. The other one is that multi-layered stories. And then the third one is sparks, maybe joy or some kind of enlightenment in children's culture. What this diversity means for us, that there are different styles of visual storytelling. There are different perspectives for the readers to identify with or recognize themselves, and also so according to these our core values, we choose every of our books, and even can take some risks. This is Laura Mert's 1001 Creatures, which was published in 2016, and ever since it has traveled around the world quite successfully. We found out that Laura was doing really different style of illustrating, a different illustrating style, and we found that it was kind of low-key for children also to learn how to do their own, and that's why we chose this. Laura was doing 1001 Creatures, which all are talking about the biodiversity, what is their features that are, and the close facts that these creatures have. And I think, and ever since we have worked with Laura and her author Aino Järvinen, we have done 2 books, and the other one was also chosen for the first graders to read at home. Yeah. So different styles of visual storytelling also means us that there is a hand tactile things. This is Hanna-Mari Ruohonen's Why Gary, Why book that she has done by cutting paper and collage technique. Everything is done by hand, and then we have reprographed it later. Hanna-Mari, we are very honored to work with Hanna-Mari, who has done like, I don't know, 50 books, and are really talented of storyteller in a visual way. What it means also, the diversity is the different styles. So there comes imagination, and you can sort of like do by illustrating, you can find this kind of imagination, ordinary stuff also. This is a book about cars, and as you can see, the car can be whatever if you use your imagination. Then there is also these different styles that we can combine together. This is my own and Reka's collaboration, which is not either of us like handwritten style or what we do as a core thing. So we want to collaborate and mix our things. Around this and other books also, we have created these kind of workshops that children can tell their own story, and they can also build up their own characters, their own self-image, their own self-portrait, or their own city from the basic shapes. And then there is like this kind of recognize themselves. So what we need to do is that we, as a publisher, we are really like, how do you say, sensitive of representing different type of people around us, old, young, healthy, disabled, from different cultures, from different skin colors, or whatever is the humankind in this world. And this is Liisa Kallio's book from last year. It's called Everybody, and it talks about how much we are. Everybody is living in the same, under the same sun and under the same moon, which actually matters the most. So, and then there comes this, But You're Not My Mom, Frank Furu and Linda Bundenstam's book from last year, which we were honored to translate it into Finnish. And it's about child who comes alone, as an immigrant child who comes alone to Finland, and how difficult it is to be without the mother. And whatever the mother, the substitute mother or the co-workers of there in a day center where she's living is trying to make her feel at home, they are not her mother. This was really touching, and first time I read the book and saw Linda's pictures, I was like crying all the time, and it still happens. And I think it's really important that we tell these type of stories nowadays when there is like a world politics situation, what it is, so we can also share these stories to the children and maybe widen up this understanding why somebody is feeling as they are. Then we have from 2016, we have from Sweden, we translated this book about losing a family member. There is a family whose mother is dying, who died, but the family who is there on the right needs to still continue their daily lives. So for children, I think it's also important to show them what the daily everyday life is looking like, and how to continue when the difficult issue occurs in life. This is my, when I studied in Konstfack, Siri was also studying, the illustrator Siri Ahmed Bakström was also studying there. And when I saw this book, straight away I contacted Siri and wanted to translate it into also in Swedish, in Finnish, from Swedish. Yes, sometimes books can also comfort you, and I think this is also something that for children is important to find those books in difficult life situations where you can get some comfort. Another thing that we are paying attention to is emotional growth and education of children. And sometimes the animals are easier to adapt these kind of difficult emotions, because then you don't have to sort of like add this extra skin color or how the human being is looking like. This is the series that we have translated from France. The illustrator is talented Marc Boutavant, and the author is Astrid I don't know how to maybe pronounce it right, Debord. And it's about Oliver Edmond en français, who is like really shy and quite careful, a squirrel. But he has a nice friendship going on, and sometimes they can just like push him over his shyness. So this is also something that gives like voice to the people who might be more silent in this society, who are not all the time shouting their opinions, but still have some important things to say. And I don't also think that there is nobody who is, like Maria said, they're voiceless. It's just like what who we need to give everybody to voice to speak their own story. Then there are different perspectives. This is Reeka Kirai's book, A Little Big Story about friendship, how the friendship can have like stronger power when there is a different type of friends in the group. And this is about this special illustration or spot is about talking about fears. So emotional world is in that way is also really important, that when we share fears with us, like nowadays, it's also really important to share our negative feelings and then try to together find a solution for them. Different perspectives is also bringing different people around the same table and cherish the different backgrounds and food culture, like Sanna Pelliccioni is doing here in Onnipoika keittiössä, which is like the child is cooking in the kitchen different type of foods. Different perspectives also gives us a chance to travel around the world. This is again a French book, Chloé Perrin, and it's about the orchestra which is losing the violinist and flutes, like a music players, and they are going to search them around the world. So picture books can open windows or doors to the different cultures. Perspective is also about the gender neutrality. This is like our gender neutral love story between two machines. There are library bus there on the right, and then there is the airplane on the left. And this is Anne Vasco's book. She has illustrated and written it by herself. And this is truly a love story, which is like really high flying when there's an airplane also, but it's also quite deep. Unfortunately, this story is not lasting, but we have to also, we feel that we need to get these kind of gender neutral stories in our publishing plan. Different perspectives also in diversity can mean the ecological diversity. This is my own book, Worm and the Sea, which talks about the animals in the sea and how bad the sea is doing nowadays. There is a pollution, and the worm is trying to save the fishes from this cleaner water. In many of our books, this biodiversity is important, and you can find it in many of them. So what it means to have a multi-layered book is that the text and the illustrations tell different layers of the same story, and the main storyline is also can have some sub-stories. And it's also for children and for adults. Even the children are in our basic target group, but the adults are anyway buying the books. So Marika Maijala's Rosie's Journey has been translated into many languages, and it came 2019 out, and it's about the greyhound dog who runs the race in every day and is really miserable. One day the dog Rosie jumps off and runs away. And while the Rosie is seeking for its freedom, it passes different sceneries where Marika has illustrated these small sub-stories. As you can see here, there is a small grey granny on a table, while she has these kind of paintings, maybe for her youth, where she has been riding a horse or something like that. So Marika is really excellent of creating these kind of illustrations that tells more than one story, but still are holding the story together. It doesn't mean that it's just a decoration. It can also add some value as a multi-layer, as another value to the story. Because we can also think about that, hey, what is actually, how is this granny, how old is she, and what she has done in her life. So, and then the text and the illustrations can also tell these kind of different layers of the same story. Here in Reka's Little Big Story About Love, it's about that how they are all talking about the different type of loves, but it's also representing that they belong together as a big family, as a family tree of this friends group. There is other sub-story in this picture. The small ants goes around, and they go through the whole book. You can find out what the ants are doing. What it means that the books also can be for children and for adults is that we are publishing books that has a deeper meaning. This is a book about Maya Angelou, which it's a American poet, screen actor. She has been done lots of things, has not been translated into Finnish so much. And this was her like biography for children, but it's also sort of like a window for the knowledge of this unknown author here. Maya Angelou was one of those who felt that she didn't have a voice when she was a child, but she made it through even by her persistence, and I think this is also something that kids can learn from the books. For children, adults, this is Maija Hurme's Atlas of Solitary Islands, Yksinäisten saarten kartasto, which is about a relationship of a mother and a child, and also child's imagination. So it has also many multi-layer things that both parents and children can read differently. Then there are like wordless books, silent books. This is Merja Palin's Taikapuikot, Magic Needles, which is also about mother and a daughter, how they have a cold and how the mother is knitting a scarf that will make them warm. So how do we choose our books and what type of books we publish is also about joy and the sparks. We have, of course, like this kind of hand-picked titles of our own taste. We are the curators, and we work with the special our own collection. We think that there is a visual fireworks has always been like in illustration style and something unique. This is Aino-Maija Metsola's Not My Strawberries book. Aino-Maija has painted the whole book by aquarels, and we think that it's just like one of those most beautiful books that are the aquarel pictures I have ever seen. The story is also very interesting. It's about the mouse who is not letting anyone come to its backyard and is building a wall there. But in the end, it accepts these immigrants or invaders to come to its garden also. It's about visual fireworks. We can do also infographics or more graphical stories for children. This is about the different sports from Canadian artist Benoit Tardif. It's about sports, and it's also, as a graphic designers, we want to also give some more information about different aspects of life. Marika, this is our first book that was illustrated and written by somebody else than we ourselves. It's Marika Maijalas and Juha Virta's Piano Karkaa, Piano Escapes, which has also traveled now around the world. And this was something that Marika was testing with us the first time, this type of illustration style. So something unique. Hanna Konola is my classmate from university, and she came with this kind of noble, humble feeling that I have this little story, but I don't know if it's a story enough to be a picture book. This is about a story about the wind, what wind does in every month, and it was so sort of like comforting and meditating book that we decided to publish it in 2016. This is September, where the wind is carrying all the birds to the warmer places. This is also Marika's book. It's about crayons that she has done with different things, and this is a book about solitude, about quite lonely wolf who is lacking maybe the joy of life, and by expressing himself or itself, it finds it. What we have done is with the Portuguese publisher we have collaborated, and this is for Yara Kono. There was Colibri Festival, Multicultural Festival 2018 in Helsinki, and we published Yara's book about 100 seeds that flew away. It's about also biodiversity, that what the seeds can do and what one seed can actually grow. And then there is also this collaboration, what we have done with both of us, with Reka and me. We have mixed our styles and done this kind of illustrated non-fiction book about trees. So, what it comes for our core values are the diversity, multilayerism or multilayered, and the sparks. There becomes more, they create bigger values maybe that are important. There is an interaction, there is engagement, and then there comes empathy. And we believe that when a child and adult are reading the book together, it creates this kind of safe place where everybody can feel safe to express their feelings. It gives tools for everybody to express or tell their own story, and it also gives this kind of freedom of ask questions. Engagement, by reading a book, it means from the early childhood, it creates an engagement, and that leads to the multiple reading times, and then it leads to the first steps towards the amazing world of literature, which is creating this kind of compassion to the different things and people from the different around the world. It also leads the children's first steps towards the fine art when we are showing different styles of illustration. That's like they are learning how to be how to read media, how to read pictures, and learn from that. And finally, this is our outcome where we are aiming at, is the empathy, what we need to have, especially nowadays when the political situation is what it is. And through our core values, we create more values, and through picture books, we can teach, educate, and also share stories and ideas and our philosophies. So that's why children's books are a special applied art form. It always serves some other cause. There is always some other idea behind it. It's not just like self-expression or anything like that. It's just an applied art form. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenni, for sharing Etana's passion for picture books and all the sparks and everything. And I believe that picture books can really change the world. We can show that the world doesn't need any borders, that everybody counts. And as you said, when you read, you can really feel that you are at home, and that's the best thing with picture books. So we are soon coming to an end of this seminar, but before that, we'll have time for some discussion with our guests. Let me welcome Jaana Pesonen, who has a PhD in education and has researched a lot in diversity issues in children's literature. Please welcome. And the rest of you as well, Maria and Jenni.
So, yes, first of all, thank you both for wonderful and very interesting speeches. Maybe I was thinking, should we start with something I would like to ask, or should we check the questions from
There hasn't been any
Okay.
questions in the chat.
Maybe
so
there
you
will
can- Yes.
I have many, as it gave me a lot of ideas and thoughts. You kind of, Jenni, a little bit already approached this topic, but while listening to both of you, I was thinking that since children's literature has, of course, I think for you, it's very clear, both of you, that it's art, and you spoke about it as your last words too. But there's also quite strong history that children's books are rather and can be quite educational, like kind of pointing to something and really making a point on something. I don't know if this is a relevant question for you, but especially when we talk about diversity and multiculturalism, do you think that there's some kind of like a fine line, or how do you think that you balance between not becoming too educative and not kind of pointing your finger on something, and still creating and making sure that it's foremost art for children?
Do you have?
If you, this is a really difficult question to answer, but I think if you, and this is something that is on our mind every time, or with all the books I've worked with, this is something that comes up, because I think publishers are quite aware of representation, how it matters, and there are always questions, how can we broaden representation within this book, but so that it doesn't become complete propaganda. We have to be careful that, like I said in my presentation, it does have to feel genuine, and there has to be, you have to think of a backstory for example, every character, that why they are there, so that they aren't just placed there as just to check off the mark.
Yes.
Because at that point, then we are not actually doing anybody any favors.
Yeah, I was thinking also that Sanna Pelliccioni in the book series of Onni Boy is already writing those characters as Onni's friends, and it's like it's not something that it's glued on top of it. And I think we have to be really careful about it, that it's included the story and the background stories of if we are just following some ideological things, it's always maybe a bit risky thing to feel that it's like glued on top of everything.
Thank you. Yes, I agree. I think it's really difficult question. And in the field of children's literature research, it has been examined for decades. I'm not expecting you to kind of empty the whole question, but I really think especially, that there needs to be background, and not just these kind of flat characters, but characters that are also something else, not just being there to represent diversity. So yes, very interesting.
And also, if the story is like universal, it should not matter what the characters are looking like. I was thinking about the Siri, how Siri Ahmed Backström was illustrating the De som är inte kvar, those who are not left. How is it translated in Finnish? So I think it didn't matter what color the family was. They were losing a family member. So that's like, I think also that we all have the same needs to be accepted. We have all the same emotions, and we have all this kind of, we are living the same type of things in our lives. If you lost somebody, it doesn't matter how is it represented.
Mm. Yes, I agree. But at the same time, maybe as the field, especially in Finland, has been rather white, as you also mentioned, that there is a strong whiteness in the field of children's literature, and it has been maybe only the past decade that it has become more diverse in terms of ethnicities, gender, sexuality, not heteronormative families, for example. So in that way also, maybe it is still meaningful that exactly it is then other than white Finnish-speaking characters.
Yeah, and my friend who has a adopted son, the son was drawing himself, because son has been living here amongst our white people. He was drawing himself as a white for a long time, when suddenly one day he realized it, and that he was actually other color. But it was also that the mother said that, yeah, it has been difficult to find out some books that would represent him for himself as he is.
So yeah, I would agree that and you probably didn't mean it quite like that, but it doesn't matter, because it does matter.
Yeah.
And also I have experience from being an arts art educator for Annantalo, but I was working on the outskirts of Helsinki with children who geographically don't have art like outside of school art education, and I was working with kids who were of different backgrounds, and there was a girl who had brown skin, and she asked for a skin-colored pencil, and I didn't think that in the year 2000 and what was it 13 that this would be an issue, because we were actually brought up with there isn't a right color for the skin. There are all of those the diversity is it was like a question from, I don't know, from the 80s, and I was shocked that for her this is still a thing, and I'm sure that it has to do with what is the representation on TV and TikTok, YouTube, where the kids get their representation. It may not be the kids' book for everyone.
Of course, I didn't mean it that it doesn't matter. Of course, it matters, but if you don't, like, I was thinking that when you read it, that you don't read it through. That is there everything included?
Yes.
So in that way, the universal themes should be including everybody's lives.
But I think, like, on the other side of the coin, where we just put token disabled people or blacks in a book, on the other side of that there is this fear of doing it wrong and being criticized, and I think in a phase when we are still sort of looking for the right answers, it can be really devastating if there is no understanding for us making. I'm sure there will be mistakes in literature. That we probably are going to make books that we will look back on and feel embarrassed about, and I think maybe there should be a sort of space for that, because otherwise we won't be able to widen our representation. I don't know.
Yeah, it's very important that you can identify with the thing you're reading, even for smaller children, always.
Yes, and I definitely agree. I think also in research it has been kind of like especially in North America and Canada and Australia, they've done this type of research for decades, and there was also a time when it became almost like kind of like that, you look for the tokenist characters in books, and if you start looking for, with very critical eye, you can find a lot of problematic things from a lot of children's books around the world. But I hope it's not the point still to find problems, but to also learn from them when you realize that maybe this wasn't that respectful way, or maybe some characters became very tokenistic, stereotypical. So I think it's a learning process, not just for the readers, but also for the writers and illustrators and publishers and the whole field. But also, if we talk of diversity, I think it needs to be also kind of brought to the table that it's not a field that has been open to everybody in Finland. So only the past years we've had in Finland the first writers and illustrators who themselves are also, for example, a person of color. So it is still a field that is developing here.
In my personal experience, I think that if you are in a place where you can sit down and create a children's book, then you are already in a place of privilege. Because even though it does take a risk, it's not something that you can do necessarily unless you have economical stability around you. You don't have to be a heiress of some giant mansion somewhere, but still there is a level of having it together that you might not if you are a first wave immigrant, for example.
Yes.
Yeah.
If there are any questions, please put your questions in the Facebook feed so we can ask Jenni and Maria something more.
Or can I ask, did someone in the audience want to ask something?
Or comment?
If we still have some time, I would like to, as it's also a seminar specifically about illustration, you kind of touched upon this topic too, but I'm really fascinated with it's exactly the illustration that can widen our horizons, that can challenge the norms, can maybe also challenge the text sometimes, and that becomes then very interesting in terms of diversity and multiculturalism. Is there something in terms of that kind of, challenging the norms, but especially the role of illustration that you, in your work, have had to think about, or is it even relevant? Does it become so naturally that you don't have to even think about it?
Well, for us, this diversity in illustration is that we want to present as many styles as we find interesting. Like that it can be naive, or it can be really, really, polished. But I think also there is lots of potential, and I strongly encourage people to do even the risky illustrations, experimental, like, for example, Maria's book, which won this Rudolf Koivu, was a good example that you didn't narrow yourself in one expression style. There was plenty of different things, and it was really refreshing to see it.
Thank you. But I don't have such a wide experience of creating children's book, but if I may borrow an example, and it feels a little bit weird to speak about someone else's book, but I know that there are examples in my slides of for example, where a book where the character apparently has Down syndrome, although it wasn't necessarily part of the original script, and in fact I think there might have been a surprise element for within the team of creators, and I think that's a really interesting story. I understand. I would completely. There is another fear within when you're making a children's book, and this fear is, will this sell? And every time you create a book that is sort of labeled, for example, this is a book about a child who is sitting in a wheelchair, or this is a book about an immigrant from Russia, then there is sort of an undertone, or it's almost like you're only meant to sell it to that particular group. But if you never mention it, then it gets marketed as just a children's book. And I hope that more books about diverse characters will just be marketed as just another children's book, and not a book about someone weird.
Yes.
Yeah.
I absolutely share and really like this thought. I mean, the whole kind of maybe what I've been passionate about in my research is to understand also how do you create a story where diversity is, in terms of kind of, if we could say, natural. It doesn't become anything emphasized. It's not something you put on a pedestal, or it doesn't make someone then the tokenist or the stereotypical character, but it's just a natural part of the story. And your example, for example, of this Päiväkoti Heippakamu, I think is quite a good example of a book series in Finland where there's a group of children and they all are in some ways diverse, that they represent maybe ethnicity or disability, ability, gender-wise or whatever, and then, but it's never mentioned. It's just in the illustration. It's kind of between the lines, and I think this is something wonderful in picture books, that it can be between the lines. It can be created between the picture, the illustration, and the text, but it's not explicitly in either of them. So that's maybe the magic of picture book.
One good example is Christine Roskifte's book, Everybody Counts, Alle sammen teller, where there is this child in a wheelchair as well. And I've been working a lot with this book a few years ago. And the children I work with, they see the wheelchair, but it's normal. And the story is that everybody counts. You have a story. Everybody has a story. So even that person has some kind of story in the book. And also when it comes to ethnicity and everything, you get it there in the pictures, but not in the lines in the text. And I think it's quite normal way to illustrate. In fact, it's normal for everybody there. And then another book. It's not about these things we're talking now about. It's a Faroese book called The Tree. It's very minimalistic. There is a rabbit, a dog, and a tree. And this book I've been working with a lot during the last 2 weeks. And when we talked about this thing that pictures can really get your imagination alive, you really see when there are only 3 things on the side. So the children start to imagine everything, what's behind the tree. So there can be those with wheelchairs. There can be a different world.
And I would like to, when I was studying art education, we had a course called like special pedagogy or something like that. And we got familiar with different types of disabilities. And something that came up during the course was that within our culture of able-bodied people, or in between, there are different cultures of different disabled people. For example, people who are deaf or need to use sign language. There is a whole culture within there, or people who need to use different equipment to get around. And just as we need to be careful of taking up the voice of someone, for example, who has a different skin color or background like that, I think we need to be careful of sort of, again, going and just adding someone or speaking for. And again, I don't mean that is what happened in the book, but there is a whole culture of their own, which is really interesting, and it would be so nice if somebody approached, for example, Etana, who has never really uttered a word, but always has used sign language, and this could be an idea, perhaps.
Thank you.
Because
we have to look in for it.
Yes, if somebody is listening.
Do we still have?
We don't have any questions here, but we still have time, so we can still talk.
Yeah. You kind of now brought it again. I really enjoyed on your speech when you mentioned this voiceless, that there's not such a thing, and you kind of also mentioned a little bit about this topic. I think it's absolutely important when we talk about diversity and multiculturalism in children's literature in general. But it's a huge question. But if you want to try to answer some or tell how you feel about it related to this problematics of giving voice, that is it something that you consider when you do your books? Because this idea of giving voice, there's a power hierarchy in it. I give you voice, so I have more power in a way. But is it a relevant question, or is it just making something, kind of creating a problem into something that you don't see a problem at all?
Oh, what a question. Well, first of all, I think we have to have the giving a voice is also to have a different stories. That's already giving a voice to the different type of phenomenon or different kind of characters or different kind of when it's included, like when, for example, when we are building our this next autumn's program, what to publish, or now when we go to Bologna, it's very intuitive gut feeling how we go and select the titles, because it's like something that if we feel that it fits to our values, what I was talking about, or if it fits for that we sort of like, it's also about broadening or widening the market, and that's the way of giving a voice. It's a bit similar than this multiculturalism, that if you choose something that I will now, it's like not glue on top of everything, but it's just like widen things. That I don't know if I'm wrong, but I think it's already art is giving a voice to the different perspectives, and it's really in that way it's important.
Yeah, because you, as a publisher, of course, you have the power. So I mean, it is. I personally see it also as an in a positive way of that. You want to also give possibilities and in a way voice to those maybe who otherwise might not that easily find ways to publish their books and have their stories told. So
yeah, I know. Yeah, yeah. I'm quite well known of my responsibility nowadays that I'm actually a publisher who can choose what to publish. Of course, we are still in a niche. We are in a marginal publisher as we are independent, and we don't have actually power in a market that could, like, we could spread our books everywhere, and this would be the phenomenon of the book of the year. So in that way, we are, like as I told, we are doing it according to our values, and in that way we are widening horizons maybe, but that's our mission.
As a creator, I think I'm thinking back to when women were sort of coming into the art world and creating and taking up space within the art world, and there was sort of this a push through moment where you were just an artist. You weren't a female artist, or you weren't a woman artist. You were just an artist. You can just create art, and everything won't be looked at through the lens of you being a woman. So I think I'm waiting for the time when, for example, somebody who has a multicultural background and a person who has, or for example, someone who is a person of color, can make a book about somebody who is white, and just make a book about somebody who, or like it feels right now like if you are a representative of a particular minority, then you are supposed to make books about being that minority. And if I would consider if I only could tell stories about myself, then I couldn't make a story about a boy, or I couldn't make a story about somebody who has a twin, or I couldn't make a story about somebody who doesn't have any legs, for example. I mean, it would only limit me to only look at myself, and that would be really boring after a while. I mean, even though I do have I guess, an interesting background with the dogs, but how many books about street dogs can you make before you want to do something else? And if I would only be limited, and also like it would be nice, it would be refreshing to see a black person make a book about being an old man with a cane who is white. I don't know, maybe.
This leads to the first question, actually. What kind of dreams do Jenni, Etana, and Maria have in making books? What would be a dream one come true project? A small question.
Let me think about it for a second.
I've never been able to answer this question, and I have been asked this several times. I think the dream is to make books, and the dream is to get books in front of, or get manuscripts and look at them, and perhaps my dream is to be in the situation where Jenni is, where I can also say no to some things and sort of pick and choose. I mean, luckily I've really had great manuscripts brought in front of me, so it would have been hard to say no. But so my dream is to develop and grow, and one day to make a book using analog media, to not always be so tied down to my computer, because that's the safe space for me, and I feel like I haven't had the width of yes, there were analog techniques in the book about the alphabet, but to really just make a book where mostly it's analog, that would be nice.
For me, it's also continue in this way of being able to publish books, and also because I'm also doing my own books, it would also maybe, if I could do one more book, it's always from another one now I also got this grant for Finnish Illustration Society, and I'm supposed to do 2 books. Let's see. I'm dreaming of doing them as a finish them also, and also to be able to publish them one day, or somebody else to publish them. I think what we had when we started is with Reka, that we went from one book to another. From if the one book was selling 1,000 copies and we got like few extra 1,000 euros, we could print another one. So I'm somehow this kind of that work that could continue. It's really a big dream. And not to just be able, to be able to continue and not to stop because of this, what is going on in the world. The past 2 years has been quite tough for the publishing field also, and that way I'm really happy and grateful that Etana is still going strong, at least this year.
And you get to travel.
Yeah, to see other publishers.
And
to share the same dreams.
And of course, same, I mean, in the way that there is a silent book. What it looks like right now, there will be a silent book thanks to the Illustrators Association at the moment, and it will focus on being from Russia.
And next question is, how does one become illustrator or storyteller without higher education on art or design? Nimimerkki, finding a voice.
Yeah,
I don't think that you need to have the higher education necessarily to have stories in you and be able. I think people have always had stories. This is something really human, and we haven't always had universities. So, and I'm sure there have been amazing stories even without higher education. And also, I think my 6-year-old is an amazing illustrator at the moment, and I'm in awe of her talent. I would love to one day be able to draw like her. And her stories and her little illustrations are stories within themselves. I'm sure I think you just have to have courage, and you have to be you have to not to be afraid of making mistakes.
And believe in yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, Annika Luther once told me when she had been written like how many books at the time, and I was like, how did you do it? How did you do the first one? She said, well, the story just came in front of me. So it's sort of like either you have your own story in you, or you start to noticing something that, hey, this could be something I could tell the story. In her case, it was something that they found something from some really Asian thing in their backyard. So the whole imagination started to flourish and grow around this founding. So I don't think that, for example, I don't have any education in writing, and still I'm writing. And I'm just like a graphic designer who likes to combine text and word, and that from there comes this kind of love for books. Also, by reading the books, I have been like analyzing how to tell stories, and it's I think the education helps you to find maybe sooner your channel your things sooner than maybe without the education. It can be a little bit longer route, but
and I think that the education puts you together with similar-minded people, and you get a network, which is something today you can get that online as well if you're just if you're not afraid of social media.
Yeah, take a risk. Just tell your story to different persons and listen to feedback and just start to illustrate. Yeah, I strongly believe that everybody can write and everybody can illustrate.
And everybody can get better, even us.
Yeah.
I hope.
Yeah. People are liking what you're saying. Their hearts coming up and they say it's important what you say. So
thank you.
Yeah. Do you have some questions still?
I was thinking if there's still time, or
there is some time still.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was thinking that now that you both mentioned also that we live such strange times in terms of first 2 years of COVID, and now actually war is present in our lives again very differently. Or it has been, of course, around the world, but because it's now much closer, it affects us also in different ways. And I was thinking of maybe a bit, you talked about the values in Etana Editions and your background, but would there still be something you would like to think of as what is your role in kind of in times like these? I mean, as a creator of children's books, as publisher or writer or illustrator, how do you see your own role?
Well, we haven't launched our autumn publishing schedule yet, but what I know that we have there, a book is about being outsider. So there is always, and there is a book, it's actually Mimi Åkesson has written it, and Linda Bundestam is going to illustrate it. And it's about being part of the group or not being a part of the group. How do we sort of what size we are defining or choosing, or where do we define ourselves? Am I part of this group or am I part of that? I think my role as a publisher, I want to bring people closer to each other so we wouldn't be so polarized, as I think that these past few years has been really being separating us, isolating us from each other. And I think we need some kind of books that we would find that we are still the same species, whatever that is, but like we are not in the other camp or in the other group, or we are not the other. So I find it quite responsible nowadays to publish books, really carefully selected ones.
I think as an illustrator, looking at the situation, I think war and violence destroys buildings, and it destroys people, and it destroys families, and it destroys bonds, and it destroys connections, and there is a risk that we lose our humanity, and we become only vehicles of hate, and there is aggression that builds upon aggression, and perhaps as an illustrator, if I can create art that reminds us of how to be human again after the crisis, or during the crisis, that we can still find space in our hearts to have culture. There are music concerts that are held in the bomb shelters, which remind people of how to be human again when you don't see the daylight for days. I think this is our role. If there is a way for us to soothe each other, but also remind us of what we can be, who we are, and
yeah, and always choose love instead of fear, sort of like we are anyway loving human creatures. So.
Yeah. And I mean, we can make book about fear, because that is another way of reminding each other of what we also are, and there is. But somehow I think we represent culture, and that can get lost, and it can get under the rubble, and there are there should be new books then on top of that in the new libraries.
There were lots of books 2015 about refugees coming out. What do you think will happen now, 7 years later, next autumn, next year, considering this war now in Ukraine? I think there will be, because in 7 years ago we got lots of picture books about these refugees coming to Northern Europe.
In Finland or in
Finland,
the North.
in Sweden.
Yeah.
There were lots of picture books about this issue.
What I know from Bologna, it's already there is books about telling about war, Ukrainian books also. has been lifted there in Bologna's book fair. And I think it's also like, of course, it's important to talk about the war now when we are experiencing it in some way or another. Is it close or is it far away? How do we feel? But there is still maybe something that I would hope that we would also bring this or create these kind of supporting books for the emotional safety, that we could feel safe in somehow even there is a war. So that would be maybe my dream, to read a book about emotional safety in few years. I don't know, it's hard to predict, but let's hope that it will maybe bring some new phenomenal books around us. I don't know.
There was last year Tammi published a book called Oravien Sota about the civil war in Finland, and then this had a lot of reactions by adults that do we need to read about these books for children? I think it was in September or October when it came out.
Yeah, I feel that there is no topic that we cannot talk for or read for children. I think it's a way of telling the story, what we can do. We don't have to be maybe brutal, or we don't have to be very harsh, but we can tell different topics, of course. If we set up, it's also already some kind of censorship.
But we need to be careful, because when I grew up, there were a lot of children's stories that were really glorifying war, and there is a sort of hidden. There can be a hidden agenda within underneath that can be used for evil, and I think that we do need to be careful so that it doesn't become like it doesn't again repeat itself, the history about how great it is to fight for. I mean, it is good. I stand for Ukraine. I stand for the people there. I think it's incredible, the heroism that is going on, but I'm afraid that there will be these stories, and then the horror will be downplayed and the heroism will be lifted, and then that can create problems, I think. If I can, this is just a careful evaluation based on books I have read when I was a child.
Yeah, maybe the propaganda can be limited.
Yes, I think both of your answers for this rather difficult question were really gave me hope. I think hope is something that I liked also when you said that, yes, it needs to be also shown, and children shouldn't be looked down on. You know, they can read challenging, difficult stories too, but it's also like, you know, that at least times like this, maybe we need also hope.
Yes.
That's the best thing we can give them just now.
Yeah, and for ourselves too, that we can tell those stories.
Okay, any questions from the audience? Yes.
We were talking about war in children's books, and I happened to think about little boys that today are not reading almost at all. Like my grandchild is 7 years, and when I've been following him grow, nowadays they are in the first class in the school. They only play computer plays where there's most of the time there's a war going on, and there's even worse where you just shoot and kill all the time. And as a grandmother, I'm really worried about it. So, have you any experiences like this, or what could be done for it? Because, well, sometimes I almost force him to read a children's book, but other than that, he is mostly interested in TV and what you can see, because he can't really Well, now he may be a little more literate, but it's all visual that they get from beginning. And
I think reading aloud with children is very, very important. And by that you're showing that reading is important. And there are lots of interesting picture books, for example, that you can read together and talk about, and
yes, I know, but
step by step.
And I think you might feel like you're forcing your child to come read a children's book, but for the child it might feel like safety to get away from that media. At the same time, I'm thinking that violence in drawings is common for boys. It has been common even before video games. This is something that is a sort of a visual. Perhaps it's a psychological way of dealing with violence, and boys do draw a lot of blood. This is just a generalization. Not all boys, obviously, but there's a lot of sword fights, and these kind of things. I would find it. I think that it could be problematic if you completely shut that down, because there will be other ways of it emerging, maybe in other medias, and maybe the games are just one way of dealing with the violence that is, for some reason, still part of boys' lives.
Yeah.
It does repeat it, and perhaps there will be. It will be different. Sorry. Yeah, you were saying again.
Yeah, well, I was just saying that I read somewhere that the teachers are saying that the boys don't read books, or very little, but girls do. So I don't know what to do with that, because it's not only my grandson, of course, but it's more like a phenomenon that is now spreading.
If I may comment really shortly, I think it's a good question and good point. At the same time, I think sometimes because these the new generations, they also need diverse ways of reading. You know, this multimedia and games and social media. It is part of their lives differently than it was when we were children, and they will need to learn to read different types of media and read critically different types of texts, multimedia, and so on. So I think personally, also mother of 3 boys, maybe it's not that we should say kind of no to any of those different media or games and such, but just to encourage that it's just not only games, for example. It's kind of modern day, that it's part of children's lives. These different modes of reading and different modes of media. At the same time, maybe it is kind of that we just have to keep on bringing them good books, reading good books. And some point, you know, the books might still become interesting. And another thing is, I'm also a teacher with my basic education. I think boys do still read. There's sometimes also a little bit of a maybe too strong way of discussing in our society that boys don't read. I'm not saying that in some terms it might be the truth also, but if we keep repeating this discourse that boys don't read, girls read, it might also become truth in some cases. I also see in my own, being a teacher and then having 3 boys, I see that they really absolutely are very eager to read if they just find interesting books. So I think our role as teachers, parents, grandparents, and so on is to do all our best to give them interesting, good books.
Yeah.
So, you know, they will still, I think, there is hope. They will find the love for reading too.
This was a stationary study, as far as I remember. And so I'm not really saying that it shouldn't be the way that you read, of course, and show a lot of pictures. That's what I've been. But also I'm so old that I was young when in the 70s, And then there was this first wave of books that were not traditional. There was Camilla Mixed and other who made some stories of a lonely mother and stuff like that. And then also it was very strict that you didn't give guns to children, for boys to play. For instance, I did not let my son do that. And then there came another wave that said that, well, they can play with the weapons, it doesn't matter, and that they like it, and it's a different story. And I also think that when boys play with these toys, nowadays they are just, you know, every Christmas you have to have a better and better toy to kill somebody. But then when now in the news you see really bad things, for instance, this grandson of mine, he's very scared and he wants to know what's happening, but you can't, of course, show him news. But sometimes and somewhere he's learned it in the school. They always do get these little bits of truth there and information that so I am prepared to talk with him about it, but not really in a harsh way.
Another part of, like you said, thank you, that we as adults have to keep we have the responsibility, and it is a part of toxic masculinity representation when we say these things, that boys will be boys, therefore they are violent. Boys will not read because such are the fate of being a boy. But also we are all women here on the stage, and many teachers are female. There needs to be a wider representation of authors and illustrators also and of course stories that are made for all kids. And we do need to still tackle this assumption that boys do not read girls' books. I think this is something that still is unfortunately the case.
I think that role models are really important, and we see that in many campaigns. We have these sportsmen that are telling that they're reading. We have Tim Sparv is a very good role model for boys. And as you said, many teachers are female, so they don't have these male role models often if their dads don't read at home. But we could continue discussing for all afternoon, but I think that we'd like to have some cake and some bubbling after this. And I would like to thank all of you who have been here today on the stream and here in Helsinki. And as a children's librarian, I hope you go to the nearest library, you borrow loads of picture books and read with your child, and take care wherever you are. Thank you.
Thank you.